The first thing you should do is take pictures of your vehicle and the locations of both vehicles, because sometimes you have to move the vehicle because there's traffic and you don't want to block traffic, but by the time the police officers show up, the defendant might say a different story. If your cars are connected to each other and the other vehicle is clearly in your lane, you take a picture, you have that picture. Later on, the defendant might tell the police officer that you went into his lane. Second thing is, if you're injured, a good thing to do is go straight to the hospital. If you're not injured, you don't have to go to the hospital right away. A lot of times what happens is, because of the adrenaline, people don't feel injured. The next day is when they wake up, and that's when they feel bad. And there's nothing that says you can't go to the hospital the next day or you can't go to the doctor the next day. It's very important. If there's a witness at the scene, get the witness's phone number, get the witness's address, because sometimes their phone numbers get canceled. So it is very important to get any information you can of any witness.
If you're involved in an accident and you're not sure what to do, call us, call a lawyer. The call doesn't cost you anything. We'll ask you some questions, we'll find out what happened, and then together we can determine what your rights are, and then you can figure out what you want to do. I can assure you that the other driver will have the insurance company on his side protecting him or her. It's really important that you have someone on your side protecting you.
It is not imperative that you file a lawsuit after an accident, but the most important thing to do is speak to a lawyer, because there are time limits where if you don't file certain things within a certain amount of time, you won't be able to file a lawsuit, or you won't be able to get your medical bills paid for. The insurance companies like to call right away, especially if it's the defendant's insurance company. They like to call right away and pretend that they're friends with you and get as much information as possible. And sometimes you could say the wrong thing, or something they like to do is they like to settle the case with you right away and just hand you a few dollars, and you think, oh, that's great, but really you're injured and you can't open a case once you settle it.
The biggest mistake you can make after a car accident is in leaving the scene without getting any information. The first thing you should do is get the information on the other car involved, try to have the police respond and get a police report as well. That way we can identify all the parties that are involved. We can identify who was responsible for that accident, what happened. And if you're injured in any way, get treatment right away for those injuries, because very oftentimes, if you don't do that, the insurance company and their lawyers will claim that your injuries couldn't have come from the accident, because if they did, you would have sought treatment right away. You are entitled to be compensated for any time you miss from work. You're entitled to be compensated for the medical expenses that you have, and you're entitled to be compensated for the impact that any injuries you sustain have had on your life, whether they've caused you to have pain, whether they've caused you to miss out on any activities that you usually participate in. Those are things you're entitled to recover for.
The first most important thing is the no fault. To get your medical bills paid for, the car you're in pays for your medical bills. So you have a right to have your medical bills paid for. But if you don't get that form in within 30 days, the insurance company doesn't have to pay for it. Not knowing the law isn't an excuse. And the insurance companies look for any reason not to pay. So if you don't get that in within 30 days, they won't pay your bills. To file a lawsuit, you have 3 years, so that you're not as rushed if it's against a private defendant.
A normal claim for a car accident standard is 3 years from the date of the accident. That's how long you have to bring a lawsuit. But there are different circumstances that might change that. For example, if you're involved in an accident with a vehicle owned by the City of New York or a subdivision of the City of New York, like for example, an ambulance or a police vehicle, then the amount of time you have to bring your claim is only a year and 90 days. And in addition, you only have 90 days to file a notice of claim to let the city aware of the fact that you're going to be making a claim. And that's only 90 days, and that is not a lot of time, so it's important that you contact an attorney right away. The length of time for a car accident case really depends. It's possible that your claim can be resolved early on, and it can only take a few months. Or it's possible that it will need to be put into suit, and it will have to go all the way the duration until the time of trial.
Average is 2.5 to 3 years. But some goes shorter if you're just doing it as a claim. And then some take longer depending the severity and how intricate the car accident case is.
But again, your case can be resolved anytime before that. So it's really hard to say how long it would take, but it could take as long as a few years.
What a case is valued depends on a few factors. One is what the other vehicle's insurance is. So you can have anywhere, the minimum in New York, the policy is $25,000, anywhere up to millions of dollars. So that's the first factor. The second factor is you don't know what a person's injury is till later on in the case. a person can have a significant injury, but if there's only a $25,000 policy, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to get more than $25,000. So there are different factors involved in what a case is worth and how much you can collect. Ironically, the most common cause of car accidents in New York is a rear end. People just aren't paying attention. I have all the time clients, they're just stopped at a red light, someone looks down at their phone, someone's texting, someone gets distracted by where they're going, they look at their GPS, and they don't realize that the car in front of them stopped, whether it's because of traffic or whether it's because of a red light.
There are a lot of different types of injuries we see from car accidents. We see people who have fractured bones. We see people who have a lot of back and neck injuries from whiplash type injuries from the sudden stopping of a vehicle. And we see a lot of people who have sustained injuries to their limbs, such as torn ligaments, which require surgery. That's very common in car accidents.
And then also, you get your knee and your shoulder. When your arms are on the steering wheel, your body gets pushed forward and your shoulders get pushed back. Same thing with your knee. If your knee is on the brake and you get a hit from behind, your knee twists because there's pressure on that knee.
And even sometimes in very serious accidents, we've also seen people with very serious injuries, internal bleeding. And you never know. Sometimes we have clients who are involved in accidents with very serious damage to the vehicle, and they don't have such serious injuries. And sometimes you have clients who are in accidents where there's not that much of the vehicle at all, and yet they sustained very serious injuries.
If you are a driver or passenger in a vehicle, the car that you are in pays for your medical bills. That's the law. That's why it's called no fault. Whether you're at fault or not at fault, the car that you are in pays for your medical bills. If you are a pedestrian, then the car that strikes you pays for your medical bills.
I need as many documents from you as possible. So whether those documents come in the form of a police report or photographs or video or any type of written statements from either you or anyone else who made any statements about the accident, any documents you have, I would want to see them so I can evaluate the case and try to protect your rights as much as possible. You do not need a police report to make a car accident claim. It's a great thing to have, but it's absolutely not required, and I've represented many clients who have made car accident claims without police reports.
All you need is to get the information for the other vehicle. So if you get their license plate, that's the best. Get their driver's license, that would be very good. Those two things, then you could file a claim.
There's a number of ways and a number of pieces of evidence we can use to try to prove that the other driver was at fault. First of all, there's you and your story and your testimony. That's the most important piece of the puzzle. But there's a lot of other important pieces, such as photographic evidence, such as a police report and what a police officer may have observed, such as critical witnesses who might have been in one of the cars or might have been in the area and saw what happened.
There are different ways to prove if the defendant is liable. The easiest way is if there's a video. Nowadays, people have videos in their car. Other drivers have videos who stop. The police have videos all around. You can ask for those. And that's the easiest way, is a video. The second way is witnesses. Hopefully, there are witnesses who saw it and stop and you get their information. Third way is if you take photos. Photos will show, especially if they're at the scene, will show where each car was.
And there's also other things we could do, such as expert witnesses who can use the scientific evidence of what was obtained either from the scene or from the witnesses and maybe create a reconstruction, a computer reconstruction of the accident, which can show who was at fault for what happens. It's possible that the person you're involved in an accident with will either have no insurance, even though by law they're required to have insurance, or they will have insurance, but they'll have a very little insurance. If that's the case, it's possible that you have a provision in your own insurance policy that allows you to collect from your own insurance policy after you've collected from the other driver's insurance.
For example, if the car you were in an accident with only had a 25 policy and you had a $100,000 policy and your injuries, you get to 25 from the other vehicle, you can go after your vehicle for another $75,000. Obviously, if you had more serious injuries and you had a bigger policy, then you can go after your vehicle for more. But you have to first get the total amount from the other vehicle. If the other vehicle that you get into an accident with is not insured, then you would go after the part of your policy that's called the uninsured motorist claim. And you would file documents, which you have to do within 90 days, against your policy. It's called a notice of intention, telling your insurance company that you want to go against your policy because the other vehicle is uninsured. We would have to prove that the other vehicle is uninsured, and then we can go after your vehicle.
I'm going to look to see, is there a situation where there's somebody else other than that driver who might be responsible for what happened to you? There might be some type of defect in the roadway. Let's say there's a missing stop sign or a non-working traffic light or something else that may have caused this accident that's the result of not necessarily the other driver, but some other entity, like maybe the City of New York or the New York City Department of Transportation. I'm going to look for that. If you are involved in an accident and you think you might have been at fault, I would suggest you call, because it's possible that you were not at fault even though you think you were, or it's possible that you were partially at fault but not entirely at fault. And even if you're partially at fault, you're still entitled to recover, because to the extent that the other driver was at fault, you can still recover for that. So, even if you're not sure if you were at fault, call an attorney, have the conversation. It costs you nothing, and you can find out what your rights are.
So if the other vehicle is found 70% at fault, and you're found 30% at fault, and let's say a jury decides that your injuries are worth $100,000, you can collect $70,000. So you get $70,000, but the 100 is deducted by the 30% that is your fault. So that's what comparative negligence is. The reason why you should hire our firm for the car accident cases is there are time limits, and everything needs to be done on time. And I've been known to micromanage those cases, making sure that the clients go to their appointments, making sure that the forms are filled out the way they're supposed to be filled out, make sure their forms are filed on time, making sure everybody does what they're supposed to do with regard to the car accident case. A very memorable auto accident case that I dealt with many years ago, actually, was my client was driving behind a construction truck, and some boulders fell out of the truck because they didn't have those coverings that you see now more often, and he hit those boulders. Him and his son hit the boulders on the highway. Thank God the truck realized that they dropped the boulders and stopped, so we were able to get the driver and the owner of that vehicle.
Sometimes I feel like I've seen it all, but then again, every now and then I see something that I haven't seen before. I remember I had one case where I represented somebody who was actually driving a taxi in Manhattan. There was a car, believe it or not, who came the wrong way down the street and hit him head on because he was trying to pass traffic going in his direction. Needless to say, that the accident was entirely the other driver's fault, and my client in that case actually had very, very serious injuries, and we got him a significant recovery, which he was entitled to. So at the Orlow Firm, we've represented many, many people who've been involved in car accidents, who were victims of the negligence of other drivers. We've done it many, many times, and we've seen so many different scenarios and cases. We are well versed in the laws that apply to car accident cases. We're familiar with the injuries that people have in car accidents. Call us. We'd love to hear what happened to you and represent you in that case.
Hi, my name is Brian Orlow. Call me today for a free consultation.